Well, we are officially here, the finale, Empire Death of this new series season of Doctor Who, and there's a lot to talk about. So, why don't we get into it? Now, my first overall impressions of this episode and kind of the stories throughout the season and how they played out, I think Mrs. Flood from last episode can say it best. So go ahead, Mrs. Flood.
Would you, sweetheart? Well, we'd all like a lot of things that aren't going to happen.
Because, yeah, exactly. I feel a little bit jaded with this finale, and it's because I feel the story had been set up to be much grander and bigger with ties and reveals throughout the whole entire way. What I will say about Empire of Death, whether it's Ncuti Gatwa, Millie Gibson, or anybody in the crew, it was acted very well. But seeing so many of the characters on the world turn to dust, very Avengers Endgame-like, to start this episode, kind of lower the stakes of knowing they're going to come back, because Doctor Who's not going to kill off all these characters. If they would have just left it, even just at UNIT, where we did see Kate Stewart and the crew there die and nobody else, I think that would have been very interesting and maybe would have made me believe that, hey, maybe this is like an actual death that we can't be reversed. But because they showed the whole world going to dust and almost the whole universe going to dust, you knew this was going to be flipped around. And because of that, we didn't get to see much about Sutekh and his genius per se. The explanation of Sutekh and where he's been is in the original Doctor Who series, when the fourth Doctor of Tom Baker faced off with him, with Sarah Jane Smith as his companion, he just latched onto the TARDIS for those centuries and thousands and billions of years, depending on which Doctor we're talking about, as he traveled around the world. And eventually, here recently, he kind of gained the confidence or the power to come back and try and claim the universe as his own empire. We started seeing both Susan Twist and Susan Triad throughout the universe, and the first sign of like the TARDIS being a little bit wonky and wild blue yonder. So I do have a question of like, okay, if you're saying he's been around here the whole time since the fourth Doctor, why is it all of a sudden now that we're getting this, Susan Triad stuff? And that was even before we had Millie Gibson's Ruby Road section that would have intrigued him, in my opinion. So that didn't work that well for me. And honestly, Sutekh just ended up being a CGI bad guy with not much else there. I think as far as Doctor villains go and finale villains, it left a lot to be desired, and he didn't end up being that big of an adversary for the Doctor in this episode. The other thing that I personally did not like was the whole, was the wrapping up of Millie Gibson's, Ruby Sunday, who is her mother. While I appreciate the idea that everybody thought she was important because, they wanted to know who she was, but in the end, she's an ordinary person that was just made important because everybody wanted her to be important, is an interesting storyline. The fact that this whole entire season we've seen things like the snow, the interaction we had with Maestro, this plotline seemed like it was supposed to be bigger, tied up throughout the whole entire season. And just this reveal as a whole felt very deflated and very like, oh, there was all this build-up for that? Again, the scenes that come afterwards, Millie Gibson's scenes finally confronting her mother, and the emotional farewell I'll get more into with the Doctor at the end of the episode, perfectly well acted, really great moments, and things I think could have landed a lot better if they didn't build up this big mystery as something that it maybe did not need to be. I think there's a way you could really tie in Ruby Sunday and have her be something that, you want to know who her mom is throughout the season. But the way they put the character of her mother in the memory TARDIS in real life, the pointing, which we eventually found out as Ruby Road naming her daughter, didn't make sense. A lot of this just didn't line up as a whole, and even with things like Sutekh wanting to know who she is, because she feels she's so important, didn't make sense because he's able to track through his own time and history to figure out where Mel is and where Mel was. I feel like he would have had the same powers to figure out where Ruby is and her lineage just from godlike power. So I didn't quite buy this ordinary person storyline. Again, not taking away from the scenes that we had afterwards and the powerful performance of Millie Gibson and the actor who played her mother. That did very well, and I appreciate that. I just wish, going back, we didn't have the snowflake thing. I wish we didn't have the maestro hearing the song inside her. I wish we didn't try making her up into something bigger, and instead of having this feel like this big moment, we spent more time with her and the doctor building a relationship, because at the end of the day, that is what I think this season should have been about, is the relationship between the Doctor and Ruby Sunday, and in the eventual, finding out of who her parents are and kind of going off on her own. You get this a very emotional goodbye from the Doctor, but because so much of the season was spent on hyping up who is Ruby's mother, had some Doctor and companion-like episodes where they weren't really much together, we didn't get to see them grow together and have this big emotional relationship. So at the end of season 1, where she's kind of stepping back, it didn't hit home. Now, we know Ruby's going to be back next season based off casting and stuff like that, so the character and Millie Gibson are not done, but this whole arc, to me, feels kind of like a wasted time. Again, just because there was so much emphasis on something bigger happening with Ruby, to have it be somebody ordinary like that, which I think was perfectly fine, you could have written it better, just don't include the snow, don't include the mysterious gods interacting with Ruby being kind of afraid or not sure. It just made her be too big of a character to kind of just be a regular character. And the fact that, like I said, Sutekh was so worried about this individual, didn't like that much. What I did enjoy a bit was 73 Yards kind of being tied in here, and I wish 73 Yards had a better tie-in to where maybe in that episode you include this DNA technology coming up where Ruby makes a decision, 73 Yards, do I want to find my mother? No, I don't want to find her. So that when the memory TARDIS picks up that split timeline that she was on, that it's a connection per se, and you could have used that scene for the Doctor to be like, oh, that's where we need to go. So, again, I think that's just a loose thread that could have been written better, but I did appreciate the 73 Yards being tied in more with the perception field of the TARDIS and just the overall story here when it comes to Ruby Sunday and the Empire of Death. So, Sutekh didn't work for me. Ruby's mother's reveal didn't work for me. The one type of thing that did work for me, is intriguing per se, is Mrs. Flood. We hear her say clever boy, kind of referencing Clara. We saw her in a Clara-like outfit last week and even beginning of this episode. At the end, she kind of gives us like a goodbye message talking about how we're closing the chapter on, the legend of Ruby Sunday and where she came from, and we're moving forward and what's going to happen to the Doctor. Bad things most likely coming his way. And here she has an outfit on that reminds a lot of people I saw on Twitter, of Romana, a classic Doctor Who companion, potentially villain. I'm not a classic Who watcher, so I can't say for sure. But clearly here RTD is making a lot of references with Mrs. Flood. She's definitely a big character moving forward. She's somebody who's giving us fourth wall breaks for a reason, and somebody that we should be paying attention to as either a big bad for next season or just a good character lying down. I've heard White Guardian, people are saying Clara, some people are saying it's Susan, some people are saying it's Romana. There's a lot of people saying the Master, the Ronnie. There are so many things Mrs. Flood can be, and the only reason why this episode I'm excited by where it's going to go, but I'm now worried, is because we just got off of, I think, a very big plot twisty thing with Ruby Sunday, with Susan Twist, with Sutekh, that didn't land very well with me personally, so I am now worried that this is going to not be handled as well from RTD in a bigger scope storyline next season. We'll have to see how that finds out. And yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on Empire of Death. The acting, I'll be able to put this at a gold level, but I'm disappointed with this, and it definitely brings down my whole entire taste for this season and series at all. I think we need more than 8 episodes moving forward. I don't know if we're going to get more. That's a very Disney Plus type thing, but this is still tied with BBC, and I hope Disney realizes this could use a 10 to 12 episode type season, and I really hope that we're fleshing things out more, and that the plan for Mrs. Flood will be bigger and more tied in better than what we got for Ruby Sunday and even Suketh and Susan Triad this season. But tell me, what are your thoughts down below? Am I wrong with this finale? Did you really enjoy this? Tell me in the comments down below. Next week I'm going to come out with my rankings of all the episodes and my overall rating for the season. So like and subscribe for that. But until the holiday special, where we have another Stephen Moffat, hopefully masterclass script coming, I wish you all a good day.